Hello again, everyone. We're back here with the sample project that we worked on in the last video, and we set up a bunch of corridors to kind of get our basic 3D model going here. So this is where we left off. We had created our pavement corridor, we had created our median corridor, our end condition left, and our end condition right. For our end condition right, we left out a blank space where we're going to be filling in with a side street, and we left a blank space for the median, pavement, and noses. So in this video, we're going to be working on taking your model from something that looks like this to this. Now let's get started. So if you remember from our last video, we set up our side street design here to kind of just include the 2D portion of the design. So we set up the curb returns and the control radii so that we could clip our median out and clip our right end condition out at the appropriate locations. So what we're going to do now is start detail modeling this side street. So what we need to do over here is go ahead and turn off the pavement, and we're going to turn on that pavement projected design that we created over here and turn that top mesh back on. And if you remember, I told you guys that this was going to be really helpful in doing a lot of our detail modeling. So I'm going to kind of show you how that works. So what we need to do is put a profile on this line for our edge of pavement. We're going to open up that profile model, and we're going to quick profile from surface, select our surface, right click to reset. Now we have a surface that comes from this projection. The reason I use this projection is because it doesn't always work out if we were to use, let's turn the projection off and the pavement back on. Oops, gotta get in here. So I want to turn the projected off, and let's turn our pavement back on, pavement asphalt. So I want to be able to, we're just going to turn off everything but the top mesh. So I want to try and get a quick profile from surface from that. And it may work, it may not, but it doesn't always. So it did work that time, but what you'll notice is if this was on a curve, we're dealing with a chords of points along a curve. So this doesn't always work when you're dealing with curves. And this doesn't always work if you're just on a tangent either. I've had several times where I couldn't just pull a profile from my regular pavement top mesh because for whatever reason it didn't want to project all the way out to this line. So that's kind of why I ended up creating that extended surface so that it was much easier. I knew for sure that I was going to get that top mesh. So we'll go back and create that again real quick. So now I know that it'll always be there, and we're going to set that as the active profile. We're also going to come down here to this line where we're going to be tying to the existing ground. I want to open that up. And you can see that we have some sod here with a curb and then our pavement. You can kind of see the typical section that we have there. So all we need to do here is set the existing ground to the active profile. And as we're doing this, you can kind of see these 3D elements being created out here. So now that we've done our pavement projected, we can turn that off. I'm going to leave the lanes off for now so that we can get a better idea of what these projections are looking like. And another thing I want to do is it's important for us to make sure that we have ADA cross slopes as we come across this opening. So I'm going to get on my construction lines green dash a minute. And what we want to make sure is wherever we end up putting our curb ramps here, we want to make sure that the slope from here to here is 2% or less. So that's conforming to ADA standards. So what I'm going to do right now is just kind of set up, because I don't know exactly where I want that thing to be, but I want to do single offset entire element. And let's just say 16 feet for now, just a guess. And that's just a guess based on where my curb ramps typically end up. So we're probably going to have a curb ramp that goes across the street here, because this is a signalized intersection. We're going to have crossings at all four legs. So we're going to have a curb ramp that goes here. We have a specific distance that we need to have for a full height curb between that curb ramp and the adjacent curb ramp. So then we'll have another curb ramp that cuts across here. And this particular driveway does not have sidewalk that continues down this side street, so we'll have a CRD, which is an FDOT standard curb that will direct traffic and go across the side street here. So what I'm going to do for now is get a profile on that line. So I want to profile slope by element. So I'm going to profile this line from this line, and I'm going to do -2, so 2% down. So now we have a profile. So now I know that the pavement will always slope from here to here at 2%. Next thing we can do is start putting a profile on our curb returns. So what we want to do is come under this button here in the vertical, and we're going to do profile intersection point. So I'm going to select the element that I want to profile, and I'm going to grab all three of these points that I want to show. And you can see how they're showing up here in the profile view. So what we're going to do is point between them, and I like to come here on this origin snap just to make sure that I'm snapping to the points and not to the ends of the lines or anything else like that. And a good check to do is just to make sure that you have the origin snap, so you know you're snapping to these points, so that if we decide to come in here and change this cross slope to -1, for example, that will move. So you have a little bit of flexibility, dynamic profiling here that you can use. So we'll put that back to -2. And we want to complex this geometry. Make sure you're going in the right direction. See the arrow on the end of that line. And we're on automatic over there in our tool. So it's automatically going to create that profile, and we're going to accept complex. So one thing I also like to do is make sure I name these things. So I usually do start with a CR for curb return, and the side street, we're calling this Rocket. And this is southwest. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to name, so I just named my complex horizontal element that, and I'm going to name my profile that as well. And we're going to set that as the active profile, and it shows up over here. So we're going to do the same thing on this side. And this one is southeast. And we're going to do our profile intersection point. We'll open this profile view. See, I want to make sure I'm snapping to that point there, because it seemed like I was kind of snapping to the existing surface, which I don't want to do. So we got our points are snapped appropriately. We're going to complex that. Give it a right name, southeast, and set it as the active profile. So one thing to make sure of when you're doing this is going to end up being a curb return. So curb return. For curb, we need to make sure that we have a 0.3% cross slope at a minimum. So I just want to make sure that this cross slope and this slope are 0.3. On this particular side street, doesn't seem like we're having any issue. Looks like our road here is a good deal higher than the existing that we're tying into, so we have a pretty decent slope that we're tying down into. So you can see over here we kind of got these yellow lines that are showing up. What's happening is the default 3D view is being is turned on here, so we can just turn that off so it doesn't kind of distract with what we're doing. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get on this pavement asphalt, and we're going to create our line here. And I'm going to go back to my normal snaps. Snap here, snap here. And since this is going to be existing ground, we can just come in here and snap that. So what I'm trying to do is fully enclose this area with complex elements that have profiles on them. And I want to kind of include all of my break lines and all of that. So what I'm going to do next is come in here and I'm going to go on. So since I'm drawing this on white dash, what I like to do with the lines that are actually going to make up my new surface, I like to put them on solid lines instead. So my dashed lines are typically my construction lines, if you will. And then I come back with these dashed lines for the parts that are going to be part of the new terrain that I'm going to create. So since I already have a profile on this line, you can do a couple things. You can do profile slope by element or profile by vertical offset. I usually just like to do this because there's less clicking involved. But you can use the profile vertical as well. So all we're going to do is click this profile, click that line, click the line it's sitting on top of, and we just want to slope a 0. And so what that'll do is now we have a line that is ruled to the line underneath it. So it's just going to follow this profile. So if the profile on this line changes, the profile on this line changes. And as you can see as we're building this line right here is kind of dictating our entire curb return. So this line profile, which is pulled from our projected pavement, is kind of dictating the profile along here. The existing ground isn't going to change. The only reason it would change is if we decided to change this offset for some reason. So we almost have our terrain bounded. Now we need to finish up creating all of the break lines. So I'm going to make a break line here similar to what I did, except I want to be on green. And I'm going to make sure I snap to the intersection point here, snap to the intersection here, and we're going to do the same thing that we did to the white line. We got that. Now I need a center line profile. So this is going to be pretty similar to what we did for the curb returns. We're going to do our profile intersection point, and you can choose to snap to this line or this line. I typically like to just keep snapping to my dashed lines because they're the most general lines. Here. So I need to get that line. So we need to open the profile view for this. Change over to our origin. Build our profile. And see, I kind of made a mistake. I'm on construction lines green. I don't think it really matters, but it's probably a good idea to just keep drawing, to draw your profiles on the same symbology, the same feature definition that you're drawing your horizontal on. It's not really a big deal, but it's something I like to do because I'm a little bit OCD about that kind of thing. So I'm going to call this, set that as active, and I'm just going to call this PR profile rocket. Then we'll come and call this center line CL rocket. Okay. Now what I need to do is I created a profile along this line, but this line is going beyond the terrain that I'm going to create in both directions. So I need to create another line that kind of sits on top of that so I can make a terrain properly. So we're going to snap here and snap here and project our profile. So we're going to make sure. So I'm hitting, see how it's selecting the center line here. I want to select that dash line I just drew. So I'm going to hit tab, and tab should work. Sometimes tab works, sometimes tab doesn't. You can also right click, and that'll get you on that construction line. So now I'm on that construction line. I'm going to reset, and I want to reference this one, slope 0. Now we have our red dashed line on here. Another thing you can do is FDOT by default does a linear stroking of 10, which means it's going to basically put a point every 10 feet along this line. So let's go ahead and create our terrain first with a linear stroking of 10 to kind of see how that looks. So I'm going to select all of my elements that I want to include in this new terrain and make sure I'm selecting this red dash. Go to your terrain, from elements, and I want to be on DTM top mesh. Now that matches the symbology that I was using in my templates as well, which will be very helpful when we're creating our top mesh for our final 3D deliverables. And I find it's very important to make sure that you give these appropriate names so that you know what they are and try to follow the same naming convention. So when I do pavement, I call it pavement, and we're just going to call it pavement rocket because I know this is rocket side street. Our feature type is going to be brake line because that's what we're doing. There's several other features in here, but I pretty much always use brake line when I'm doing detail modeling. I also use the edge method of max triangle length and a max side length of 2. That just makes sure that I don't get any lines that form out here or anything. I don't really want anything connecting outside of this boundary. So we're gonna data point and just keep data pointing to get through all of these, and we have our terrain. So you can see there's a vertice about every 10 feet. Now that's okay for some of this stuff, but I find I like increasing the linear stroking on some of these lines, or decreasing it, I guess. Increasing the drop, decreasing the number. So I like doing 2 on my curb returns. So you can see we have a lot more points now along that return. So we're going to do 2 over here. Let's think into the next step. So these ones that are parallel with the road, I like going with 5. We don't need quite as many as we're going parallel with the actual roadway. The roadway being our State Road 100 that we're building our road off of here. And then we can just do our last one here. Sometimes it's hard to get on these lines. Yeah, sometimes that thing keeps coming up, so you gotta right click. Now we can get it. Turn that to 5. So now we have a much more, we have a lot more vertices on our terrain here. So that's really helpful. And the last thing we're going to do here as we create our terrain is we need a surface template. So we're going to click on our terrain and we're going to apply a surface template. And the DOT has set up standard surface templates. So this pavement asphalt here, I've gone into my template library and adjusted the depth of the asphalt and the depth of the base to match that in my pavement design, so that when I place that, it's going to match the pavement design that's in my templates and everything else. So we're going to hit OK, and we're just going to click through, and I turned it off in here, it looks like. DTM top mesh was kind of covering it up. So now that we've turned that DTM top mesh off, you can see we have our pavement surface. So the next thing we're going to do here is work on our corridors for our curb returns. Alright, we're going to start working on our corridors here for our curb returns. So I'm just going to start on this side here. I'm going to click on this corridor here, and I want to create corridor. And I'm going to right click for my active profile. And one of the reasons I make sure I name these before I make my corridors is now my corridor is already named for me. So I know that my complex element, my profile, and my corridor for this curb return all have the same name. Makes it a lot simpler. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to choose, we'll just choose this template for now. So I'm going to just do this for the entire length. So I'm going to Alt Start here, Alt to the end, and drop interval of 2 is pretty good for curb returns or anything that has kind of a rounded surface. You want to try and grab as many points along that curve as you can. So now, make sure we turn off our bottom mesh here too. So now we have our curb, and we got a 2-foot flat, and we got a tie down. So obviously we got a little problem as we come up here. We need a different template drop to match to the sidewalk. So for your phase 1 models, it's probably okay to just change this out so you have some sidewalk going through here or sidewalk coming down here to do that. But what I've developed is some 3D civil cells where I can drop a civil cell along this line and it will fully model out a curb ramp. And so that's what I'm going to show you guys how to do. I'm going to do a different video on how to develop these civil cells, both 2D and 3D, so that you guys can do this too. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to make a little space here. I'm going to pull this template back a little bit so he's not going all the way to the end. Now most of these curb ramps are based on the length along the curb back. So what I'm going to do here is start drawing a construction lines yellow dash, since curb's usually drawn in yellow. And I have F curb here, so I'm going to make sure I have a 2-foot offset. I'm going to start from the end of this line, and I want to make sure this goes a little bit down the return, because what I'm going to end up setting up here is the distances to the next curb return as well, so I want to make sure I can at least get down there. So I'm going to go about, let's say, 55 feet. And it just drew on the wrong side, so we'll just flip this over. So I'm going to get now on my red line, and I need to do single offset partial along there as well. And what I've been doing with a lot of these curb ramps is I go 3 feet from the PT to kind of give us some space for the curb ramps so the curb ramps are not right up next to that PT. And then we know we need 7 feet for the flare, and I do a 5-foot ramp. Some of these curb ramps require a 4-foot minimum at the back of curb or the face of the sidewalk curb. So doing a 5-foot ramp along the back of curb ensures that I'll have that 4-foot minimum at the back of sidewalk. So that kind of comes out to 3 feet plus 7 feet plus 2.5 feet, which is 12.5 feet. So I'm going to draw that in there. We are going to do a biangle from element from our edge pavement to the end of that line. And we're going to go 90 degrees for 15 feet. 15 feet doesn't really matter, but it's just a good round number. Make sure that we're extending that line beyond the limits of the curb ramp, and then we can just go to about 3. So now we're going to place our curb ramp civil cell. So I'm going to go into our model detailing and place civil cell. And when you click this, it's going to show you all the civil cells that are available. So FDOT has created some civil cells. I've created my own DGN library, which I will show you how to do in the civil cell video. I will also show you how to add this to your configuration variables so that your DGN library also shows up in this list. So we need the CRB Northeast Southwest 3D. You can see I have a lot of civil cells in here. I have some 2D, some 3D. I have several curb ramps created. The ones that don't have directions on them are for being placed along tangents. But this one, we need the Northeast Southwest. So all of these civil cells are based on reference lines. And the fewer reference lines that you can base them off of, the easier they are to create. So since I created these civil cells, I know that I needed to set up an edge of pavement profiled as it shows here. So we're going to select that, as well as a ramp center line here. So it's going to give you a preview of what it's going to place, and if you have any alternatives. What you can do is, if this wasn't showing up correctly, you could flip the direction. You can see if I flip the direction, it's going to break. So I don't want to do that. And you can right click and then left click to accept. And since it's complicated civil cell, it might take a second to draw depending on your processing speed. And you can see that we've created that 3D civil cell. So you can see our curb drops down to a drop curb. The drop curb is the same slope as the sidewalk. We have our flares, our 4-foot minimum at the back, 45-degree angles, pretty much everything you need for a perfectly modeled 3D curb ramp. So the great thing is I designed this once in my civil cell library, and now I can place this any number of times by just doing that. So now we need to do the next curb ramp here, which is going to be a CRD. So what we're going to end up doing here is I need to, let's see, I want to get on this line here again. And I know my CRD, so we're going to do a single offset partial. And between adjacent curb ramps, you need to make sure that you have a 4 feet of full height curb. So I could go from here, but I think we're just going to go, for this instance, we're just going to go from right here. This is where the sidewalk comes in. Then we'll make sure we have a nice 4-foot full curb, sidewalk, everything. So we're going to snap to there. So I know I need to go 4 feet plus 7 feet for the ramp down. And I know that my civil cell is based on the near edge of that. So that should give me what I need. So 4 plus 7 is 11. So I can snap to there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create another green dash line that goes across there. Single offset partial. Then I'm going to do single offset entire. And I'm going to hit N to get off here. I'm just going to place it for now. I find that it's easier if I want to snap my offset to an end of a line, it's easier just to place this anywhere and then come back and grab your offset and snap here. Now that's ruled there. And what we're going to do with this guy here is, I know this is basically the back of my sidewalk, so I need to have that extend across here, but this ramp width, according to the DOT standards for a CRD, is 5 feet this way. So instead of ruling this to that line, I'm going to change the rule to this line. Now it's going to kind of screw up what we're doing over here for a second, which is okay. So I'm going to click on this line, and we're going to come over to the rules and do the replace reference, maybe. So you can see it's showing me what it's currently referenced to. I want to replace it with this line. Now it's going to be 16 feet from that line. See how it comes much further. All I have to do is come and change the offset to 5. And now we're right back to where we need to be. So the reason I drew this green line is because I know that my reference line for this next curb ramp kind of requires a line across here. So we'll just start it here. I'm going to hit end so I can extend this out. We'll just snap that to that line, kind of hold it in place. And so we got that. And we can go back to our model detailing, place civil cell. So I may get this CRD wrong because these CRDs kind of work a little funny the first time. So we are southwest again, but sometimes they don't work out just right. So hopefully I get this right. Otherwise we'll just switch over to the other one real quick. So this is asking for ramp near edge, is what I decided to call it. So nearest to the road. So it doesn't look right. right now. So let's try switching the direction. And I was right. I picked the wrong one. So that's kind of how you tell if you pick the wrong one. You can, if you switch directions and it still looks wrong, you got to select the other direction. So I need the northwest southeast one. Northwest southeast. EOP here. So when I built these, I built it on the opposite side of the road. So you'll see that flipping the direction of that and flipping the direction of that makes it work. Let's give it a second. And now we have our CRD. Curb comes down, we got drop curb. Sidewalk curb comes around, matches up with the regular F curb. Really nice. So now what we need to do is kind of do a little bit of cleanup to finish up this side. What I'm going to do is drop these civil cells. I don't really like keeping civil cells active in my files. It might be an old SS4 thing, but too many civil cells in your file really causes it to bog down, so I tend to drop them if I've placed them and they look correct. So essentially what we have here is a couple corridors that have been placed along this line. So I'm going to leave those corridors intact, and I'm going to come back and modify my original corridor. So I'm going to pull this template drop, and I'm just going to snap it to, there's a line underneath here. Am I in the right thing? Yeah. Should be a line there. Anyway, we can snap it to there. And it comes and snaps right together. Yeah, I think I'm going too far. There's a line here. There we go. Now no overlap. So yeah, this corridor comes out to there. So we still have a few gaps. So what we can do is come on our original corridor and do another template drop. And we're just going to find our sidewalk left. And I'm just going to snap it between these two corridors. Just do a drop interval of 2 is cool. Fill it in that little gap. And then we need to come here for the end. Snap. So there's a construction line underneath that corridor line that you can't really see, but I know it's there because I built it. So anyway, then we can Alt to go to the end. And let's close that. You can see we have the curb return fully modeled. Perfect curb returns. Everything connects. Looks really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side real quick, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how we're going to extend the curb ramps so they project across the road so we can do these curb ramps and also set us up to do our median curb. Alright, so we're going to do one last thing in this file, and that is kind of set up our crosswalk so that we can draw our curb ramps on the opposite side of the street. So I'm going to get on my green dash again, so that's just what I like to use. And I'm going to go with my biangle from element and make sure I'm snapping to my center line. And before I do that, I'm going to turn off some of these levels. So you can see we have a default levels on here. We have all of these corridor lines on here, and that's going to make it a little difficult for us to snap to some of these things. So I want to make sure I'm grabbing that. And I'm going to snap to the intersection here, because that's the center of my crosswalk. And I'm going to end and make this go a little further. Let's just say this goes 65, looks pretty good. And we'll just go 65 the other way too. No problem. Do the same thing with the other crosswalk. Snap. 90, 65, 65. And then For FDOT, crosswalks at a signalized intersection are typically 10 feet wide, so we're going to offset this 5 feet, and yes for the mirror. So that just kind of gives us an idea of where our crosswalk's going to be, and that will help us set our median nose as well as draw our curb ramps on the opposite side of the street. So what we'll do first is go into the end condition left file and make a little space for our curb ramp civil cells in our existing corridor. Drop our civil cells in there and then stitch everything back up. Alright, so now we're in our end condition left file and we can start setting up to draw our curb ramps in here. So what I'm going to do first is you know how I like to create some boundary elements for things I'm going to model. So I'm going to create some boundary elements off of this crosswalk to kind of get my modeling going here. So just going to do 10 feet on either side. So I'm going to set up my edge of pavement, 40 feet offset. I'm just going to snap it to my boundary elements for both of my crosswalks. Okay. And I need my center line. So I'm going to go borrow this red line there. And I don't need to use this entire super long line for my reference element, so I just kind of make sure it's decently long enough. It's just a reference line. So now we have our center line of our ramp. The only thing we haven't done yet is profiled our edge pavement. So we're going to turn off this pavement. And when I'm attaching files, I usually like to do so in the default model because that will attach the default model of a model file as well as the default 3D view. So we're going to attach that pavement projected to my default model, and it also attaches the default 3D over here. So I'm going to try and grab this. And same thing as we did on the side street, we're going to quick profile from surface. You can click anywhere on that surface and it's going to give you that profile. We'll set it to active. Same thing over here. Yeah, sometimes when you got too many lines on top of each other. Alright, so let's do this. Just turn that off for now, so we don't need to see it. Got our profile. Alright, so now we can drop our curb ramp. So we're going to go back to our detail, place civil cell, and I'm going to select the 3D civil cell that doesn't have a direction on it because this is just along a tangent, so these are more easier, simpler to place. I don't have to worry about which side I'm picking and all that stuff. So we're going to do some CRBs and CRB 3D. And I guess the only thing that's important when you're setting up your reference lines for civil cells is to draw your lines in the direction of the stationing and from right to left is basically how I've set them up. You can set them up any way you want, but it's a good idea to remember how you built them and then follow that convention when you're setting up your construction lines. So we're going to do our EOP profiled and make sure we're selecting that red line. Right click to skip, place. Obviously when we look over here, once it places it, we're going to have some stuff on top of each other. That's fine. We can just move over here, do our other one, get those in here, and then we'll fix everything up. Alright, so both got placed. Remember to drop them. Civil cells, I'm just nervous about having civil cells in here. So this one, I believe it's still part of a civil cell. It is. So I'm glad this happened because sometimes you try to drop it and it won't let you. So we can come over here to our Explorer, our Open Roads model. open this up, come down to our civil cells, and you can see I still have one civil cell active in this file, so I can right click and drop. Sometimes that drop civil cell tool just doesn't want to work. I don't know why, but that's how you drop it if it doesn't work. So we've created our civil cells, we've dropped them, they're sitting here in 3D. Now we need to make a little space for them in our template. So I'm going to go to my corridor, grab my bucket, get on this corridor. And remember we have our handy dandy blank profile, or corridor template drop. Jeez, I can't talk. And we're going to snap to this edge of that drop and this edge to make our hole. Choose 2. Remember, it doesn't really matter. Do the same thing over here. Make our hole. And then we can go ahead and delete those blanks. And the last thing I like to do is, since this template drop here isn't snapped yet, I like to come in here and make sure it's snapped to my construction line that's sitting underneath there. So that basically helps it so that if I decide I want to change this curb ramp, since this curb ramp is dictating where this curb ramp is placed, if I decide I want to have 5 feet over here instead of 3 feet, for example, this will slide along too, and then this template drop will follow along with that line. Same with this one over here, as long as I snap it to here. So I'm basically creating this system of rules that if one thing moves, everything moves along with it. And you can kind of make sure that you're doing that by making sure that you have snaps on everything. Very important. So we'll finish that up. And we're all set. So let's go ahead and take a look at it real quick. So now we have our side street and our curb ramps looking pretty good here. So we're almost done with a full intersection. So the last thing we have to do here is look at our median opening and adjust that, draw that, make sure that we have all the space we need for all of these crossings. We'll do that next. Alright, now we're back here in our median file and we need to start setting up where our median nose is going to go, as well as this left turn lane. So I'm going to start here on the right hand side where our left turn lane is going to go. And I know I have an 22-foot median here, so I'm going to end up with an 11-foot radius on this side and a little bit smaller radius, which is 5.5 feet over here. So I want to make sure that I can have a median nose and my median nose does not block my crosswalk. So right now it looks like my median nose, if I set it up for this to start right here where the control radius comes in, I'm going to end up blocking here. So on this side, I want to grab my white dash, and we're going to go ahead and do a single offset partial of the edge of this. And let's just say we go 10 feet, which is the same as this line here. That's fine. We're going to draw our own line in this file. I don't want to draw a line on top of that. So I just want to make sure that it goes a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left of the median limits. So now we have that. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my, let's do green dash. I like green dash. So the minimum queue length for a 45-mile-an-hour road urban condition would be 100 feet. So let's set up our queue length. 100-foot queue length. And the L distance is 135. So that's the distance from the end of the queue length to the beginning of the taper. So we'll do 135. And then I'm going to grab my white line again, and I want to just going to go 10 feet beyond that to set up my boundary on this side. So we're going to do the same thing over here. So I know I need an 11-foot radius over here. So let's make sure I do something like, let's just do 15 just to be safe for an example. And we can always adjust this later, no problem. So that'll be that line, and then I'm gonna actually I want to make my boundary elements red. That makes a lot more sense to me. So let's set the feature definition of this one to red. And I'm going to offset this 10. Okay. So that's going to go there. I want to offset this just on this side though for 10. And I'm going to turn off this median corridor lines here. So what I want to do now is start creating my edge of pavement elements along here. So I'm going to get on my white dash, and I'm going to go from the center line and offset 11 feet for the edge of pavement. I'm going to snap it to my boundary elements. And then do the same thing on this side. So now I can come in here and create profiles for these. So using my projected surface again. Okay. And we need to set up one more line, and that's right down the middle, because that's going to be basically our crown of our pavement down the median. So we'll set that up, and we really only need that to go to here, because this is really going to be for our detail modeling only. And to make sure I can see that a little better, let's set the priority of this to -1. Hopefully that will make that show up a little better. Where's this default coming from? End condition left. So it's always a good idea to just kind of clean up sometimes so that you can see what you're doing. So those default lines are coming from point controls we've created in other modeling files. Those point controls are always created on a default model for some reason. So I guess that's just the way they set it up. So I guess this is a good situation where I can show you how even this pavement projected doesn't always work the best. And it actually works in this case. I've had times where sometimes it will give me like segments of the line or pieces will be missing. It just all depends on what kind of profile you have along there, your distance to your template drops, if it's on a curve or not. So whenever I'm doing something in the median, I just like to make sure that I'm just projecting. So I'm going to profile this guy, and I'm just going to go 2% up. So that just makes sure that this line is 2% up at all times. So now that we've got kind of our entire boundary set up, let's do the median nose on this side. So I want to get on my edge of pavement level, and we're going to do an arc from element, simple arc from element. I'm going to grab from here. I'm going to intersection snap to here. And these arcs are kind of tricky, so I'm going to try and keep this arc going in this direction as I come up here. Okay, good. So the first intersection snap is setting the radius of 11. So I'm snapping to this line to rule the radius to the distance between here. And then the last intersection snap is the arc end point. And then I don't want to trim or extend anything. So now I have this arc that if I want to change this to 20, it moves. And because I set up this boundary element to be 10 from that, all my boundary elements move too, which is very important. If I hadn't set up this boundary element and I only drew these 10 past this line, and I increase this to more than that distance, I might lose my profile, or I might lose that line. That, you know, this could get pushed out further than that line was drawn. But since I have this boundary element and this is ruled to it, that will never happen. So we can come back to 15. right there. And let's go ahead and turn off this projected pavement a minute so we can see what happens here. Actually, I can't turn that off. I need that because I need that to make my profile. So we're going to come in here and we're going to do this. And it creates this profile. Now you can either use this, since this is exactly what it's going to do, or you can do your profile intersection point on this point, and this point, and create your line. For now, I'm just going to do this. This is what I've been doing in my design as well. I think it's a lot smoother. So you can see that it's drawn this line out here. And if we turn our template drops back on, I can drag this back and snap to that point. And now, if I change the offset of that, this template will also move with everything else. So very handy to do that. So now we can turn our pavement projected off so you can see what we're doing. So you can either do a corridor along here or you can do a linear template. I choose to do a linear template because this is a pretty simple template drop, and I don't really feel like setting it up for both sides that you need to do on a corridor. You can see that I've already got it set up here to do type E nose. So if I go to my 510 components, CRG type E nose. So it's just a type E curb, high side, and got my ref point here. That's going to follow the edge of pavement, and it's just going to wrap around that nose. So I'm going to select my template. So it had it kind of like in cache, but it didn't really have it, so I need to select it again. See now how it found the appropriate path to it. So I'm going to lock start, locked end, and here's where you can kind of flip which way it goes. So you can see it flips if I go on either side of the line. So I obviously want it to go on the inside of that line. And I'm just flicking through these, and we have that drawn. So there's our curb. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off all this stuff since we've set that. And we're going to grab our yellow dash because we're going to start modeling this curb. So I'm going to single offset 2.25 because this is E curb in the middle here. So I've got that. And we're going to get our green. Where's my green? I got green dash. Let's get green solid. And single offset partial from here to here. So that's going to model this edge. And then I also need to model, we'll just do it along the center line from the intersection of here to here. And this just kind of brings that crown point nicely down to there. So what we need to do is figure out what the height is from the edge of pavement to the back of the E curb when the E curb is raised. And the easiest way to do that is to come into our template drop. And I had remembered the number at one point, but I just forgot it. So the easy way we can do this is open up this point properties. And right now we can see this is vertically constrained to the face at 0.25. But I need to know what the distance is from the ref point to here. So what I can do is just change this point, and it's 0.45. That's not entirely, that's right, but we want to get a little more accurate. So let's go to our settings and our file, design file settings. And I'm going to change my working units to 4 decimal place accuracy. And then I'm going to open up my template again and double click on that. And since I didn't save anything last time, it didn't save that, and I don't want to save it. I just want to get this number, 4465. So that's a little better. So we're going to close. So I didn't save anything on my template. But now I want to come in here to my geometry. and I want to do the vertical offset from element. So I need a constant. There's several different options in here, but we're going to stick with the constant. So we're going to profile our back curb, and we're going to do it from the edge of pavement for the entire length, and we're going to paste that height. And I should have, you can kind of see the element there at the back of curb. Alright, now that we got the back of curb modeled, we can do the sod here. So we're going to go on the side, get that profile going. So what I'm going to do is get my profile intersection point from the back of the curb, and then we're going to draw our lines out here. So I'm just going to draw them out randomly. I know that my median from my template is 4%. So is this. So what I can do is switch over to my drawing tab, go to trim to intersection. We're going to trim these up, and then we're going to profile complex. And sometimes when you trim things and it breaks over hard like that, it's asking you to fork select path. So we're going to fork down and accept. And then we're going to do that guy. So now you can see it kind of created that over there. And then we'll do our last element here. Back to our geometry, profile intersection point. Select that one and that one. So that should help us bring the normal median crown down to the curb. There we go. So now what we can do is grab those elements that we just modeled, drain from elements, and run our DTM top mesh again. I like to data point first before I name this, so we're going to call this sod, median nose, rocket, west. So pretty good descriptive. And we'll turn our top mesh back on. And see, we got it's pretty good here. It's back on that 10 linear stroking again. Whoops, increment. Let's make this 2. Kind of cleans that up a little bit. We'll make this 2 as well. And then we'll make this one 2 as well, so that'll fix our, should fix all these up a little better so that they give us a little better linear stroking. There we go. So now that, you know, fixing that linear stroking can really help make your terrain models a little clearer. Really make sure that we're grabbing all of the elements there. And then we need to add a surface template. So we're going to add our sod surface template. Place that down. Let's turn off that DTM top mesh. And we have our nice median nose. Everything lining up, everything modeled, nice and clean, no holes. Next we'll move on to the other side where we'll do this median nose here, and we can set up starting to do our left turn lane. So what I need to do here is create a corridor for that pavement that's going to go along there. So we're going to create a corridor here. Maybe. And we're going to reset for the active profile. We're going to call this State Road 100 left turn rocket. Okay. I have several templates set up in here that are kind of for my left turn lanes. They're really simple. I'll go into these in a second after I drop these. So we're going to do pavement left turn. So LT is left turn lane left side. So I'm going to drop that. And I want to drop that from the beginning of my left turn to the end of my left turn. And we'll just do 5. So you can see it just drew some random lines out here. There's a reason for that. So if we come down here to this pavement left turn left, it's basically everything is set to 0. So my left pavement EOPN, if I move it like 2 feet to the right, you can see this is essentially what it's going to do. For my ref point, it's going to, this point is going to come out and find some pavement asphalt EOP. So I'm going to have to make sure I draw my reference lines in for that. And once we add those, this point will snap out to those. This reference point is going to be point controlled to the edge of pavement of the travel lanes, and it will draw this pavement section. But I need this to be at 0 to begin with, because the minimum distance between the PGL, the ref point, and the pavement EOPN, so I'm not going to save this, is 0 when it's right here where the taper ends. So we're going to go ahead and we'll set up our edge pavements first. Single offset partial, and we're just going to write down the center line, and we'll snap it to here. And I forgot to draw a line. I need that end taper. Let's do that. So we got a 50-foot taper. Single offset partial here. And it really doesn't matter if you snap on the center or the end points of these lines, it's still snapping to it. So I think the only time it would matter is if you can adjust the offsets of these, this end offset or this end, or if you obviously change the middle, it changes both. So I think that's the only time where you might run into a problem if you do that. But for these types of lines, I know that I'm always changing the entire offset of the line. And then we will go from here to here. So now I have my turn lane set up. And let's turn our corridor back on a minute. And we're going to go grab this corridor. And I need my pavement, because I need to create that point control. Let's set up the external reference first, so you can see the pavement section's kind of spread out. So you can see the pavement is spread out. We need to set up a point control from here to the end, and we'll just call it ref rocket left turn. And we're going to point control the ref point in both corridor feature. We're going to find our travel lanes and our left PGL in. Alright. So now that we've done that, we need to modify, we need to put a point control on our median to snap it to that pavement. So what I'm going to do first is just bring this median back to, let's just say here. So we can see now we got our pavement in there, which is great. So I need to set up a point control from here to here, and we're going to call it, we'll just call it rocket left turn, because it's not really a ref point at this point. So we need to do our left pavement EOP in. It's going to be both. Corridor feature, that corridor we just created, left turn rocket, and we can go ahead and find our reference feature. So nothing's going to happen yet because we need to pull our template drop back. And since we know that our nose is going to be right here, we can just snap it to here. And we've got our left turn lane. Pretty cool. So now we can go ahead and do the median nose for this. So I'm just going to turn off these again, make this a little easier. Get on our get our arc out here, and since I've already drawn this, I can pretty much just snap. See, I'm running into the issue of the arc. It doesn't want to. Sometimes we can alt. Yeah. So what I'm going to have to do is draw it from the other direction. So I'll draw it from here, snap, come down here. So that's basically how you fix that if you run into an issue where you can't get it to go the right direction. So we want to, let's set up all of our horizontal lines first here. 2.25. We need that to be green. And single offset partial. So I can't quite draw the line from here to here because since we have a left turn lane, that crown is now here. So typically on these smaller noses where the crown's right about there, I don't really worry about adding this additional line here because it's kind of just going to fix itself. Not a huge deal there. So we're going to do our profile again. And actually I need to profile this first. So let's close this corridor. We're going to turn our pavement projected back on so we can grab that. Okay. So see, this one's got a kind of a wavy profile. So you know that's following that. Do the curb, reference element. It's all set from last time we did it. That's great. So then we can model this, do our profile intersection points. So this one's going to be a little bit different since we're going to come up. I'm just going to kind of snap to that edge. Make sure this is at 4%. See, I don't want to come up and snap to that line because then I'm not going to get this line matching what's happening with my template. So I want to make sure I'm matching what's going on with the template there and not just creating a line between those two. So we'll do our drawing tab again, do our trim to intersection. Alright, now we can go back to our geometry. You can see sometimes I use the ribbon at the top, sometimes I use this drop down. It's just kind of whatever I feel like doing in the flow, I guess. So now we've got that. So we can create our linear template. We've already got it all set up. I want to make sure I flip it so it's on the inside. And we can adjust, let's just adjust all of these linear strokings right away so that we get a nice terrain once we create this. Okay, we can turn off, let's go over here, I just want to make sure it comes on when we, so let's turn on our top mesh. So we've got everything modeled. We'll create our terrain from elements, and we're on break line, we're in a data point, and then I'm going to come over here and call it sod, median nose, rocket, east. Alright, we get our terrain, apply our surface template, shut off that DTM top mesh. Sweet, that nose is done now. So all this stuff is perfectly dynamic. So if I want to change this offset to 20, slides back, that slides back. As long as I have everything ruled appropriately, everything moves. So it's really handy. So you set this up once, if you do it the right way, you can always change things. So like I said, if you find out that you need to move this curb ramp over or something, you can always slide this over if you need to, or if you find out you really need to get this as tight as you can here, you can reduce this offset a little bit. That's really what we're trying to set up here, is everything being completely dynamic. So the last thing we need to do is do the pavement, and the pavement is pretty simple. So I'm just going to turn some of this stuff off in here so I can do this pretty easily. So I pretty much have everything set up to do my terrain building here. So I'm just gonna get on my construction lines white like I did before on the rocket, and these are going to be my terrain elements. So again, we already have profiles. We already have profiles along here and along here that we created from our pavement projected. And this is just going to come out and snap to here. And then we need one here that snaps and snaps. So now I'm just creating a boundary elements for this terrain. Okay, and then I need one more here for the crown. We're going to snap to the intersection point. So when you're snapping to that intersection there, you just want to make sure you're grabbing the actual edge of pavement line there. And this we can just snap to here, we can snap to that line. And then we're going to do profile slope by element because I just like using that better than the other one. And it's all going to be 0. So I'm grabbing my white dash line, or white line, and selecting my white dash line as the reference. Building all of these terrain boundaries. And then this last one here, we'll turn on our pavement projected one more time. Another handy reason to have this pavement projected. Boom. So let's turn off that pavement projected. We're going to turn on the top mesh again so that we can see this newly created thing that we have. So I'm just going to leave that at 10. All those are at 10 because my template drop is 10, so that should be fine. We'll just reduce this one to 2 just so we get a little better cut along there, and we're going to select the bounding elements of this terrain. So we got those selected. Terrain, from elements, data point, and then we're going to call it pavement, median, if I could type, rocket. And we've got our terrain, and we've got our surface template. Let's turn off top mesh. And we've completed our median modeling. So now all of this is fully dynamic. So if you move one piece, everything moves together. So it's basically just like I said at the beginning. We've gone from having a hole in our median, no curb ramps, no side street. Now we've got a fully 3D modeled intersection. And that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys it helps you out doing your intersection detail modeling. Thanks.